I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons first. Thank you so much to my Bibliospren, Bibliohowlers, and my Bibliomancers. It means a lot to me that you give me your extra support for my passion and hobby. Hi everyone, Petrik here. In today's conversation with authors, yes, authors, we have Philip Chase, my fellow friend, my fellow booktubers, and my fellow book reviewers, and now authors. Philip Chase, the author behind The Way of Edan and also the Eden trilogy. And just in case someone don't know you, can you introduce yourself first, Philip?
Oh, thank you, Petrik. Let me just say that it is an incredible honor for me to be here on your channel. And you and I have known each other for a good while as booktubers. We've been in quite a few discussions together on books that we love. But it is a little different for me now because I'm wearing my author hat.
Yeah.
So I'm just incredible. And, speaking as an author, I would like to thank you for all that you do for our community. I'm sure that a lot of authors feel the same way that I do, that you do so much for us on your channel with your reviews, with your SFF spotlights, all that you do. You really are a real pillar of our community. So thank you so much for inviting me here in my author capacity. I really appreciate it. And also, yes, I'm Philip Chase. And as you mentioned, I do have a booktube channel. It's just my name, Philip Chase, and I talk about fantasy there. And I've been writing this trilogy of mine, plus a standalone sequel that I've also written for the last 18 years or so. And so not continuously because I'm an English professor. I mostly have been writing during the summers. So but yeah, it's been a long journey. It's been a really long journey, and I've met some wonderful, beautiful people along the way, and I'm really happy to be part of this community here at this particular moment. So yeah, and I'm releasing my first book very soon.
Yeah, very soon, just a few days from now. I really have to say thank you so much for the kind words really about my channel. It's not always easy to do. I think you know the struggle. Sometimes it's not always easy to maintain our channel, and it means a lot really to hear that. And seriously, I am so impressed that you even though it takes 18 years, that is still super impressive, Philip. You do know that I respect you a lot for that. I mean, let's just start with the first question. How did The Way of Eden came into fruition? I mean, you mentioned that you wrote this in about 18 years, and that's a trilogy in 18 years. You are ready to publish all trilogy this year, and that's incredible. So how did it all came into fruition?
Wow. Okay. So I could start with when I was born, I guess. But I really should go back to when I was a 12, 13-year-old boy reading Tolkien and thinking, wow, I was just so blown away by the experience of reading Lord of the Rings and thinking to myself, this is what I want to do. I want to do this. I want to write stories that do this to people. I couldn't articulate. I didn't know, what catharsis meant as a 12-year-old boy, but I knew I was experiencing it. The end of that story, I was in awe. I was in a state of wonder and bliss at the beauty and the sorrow of it. And I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. So I actually took a very scenic route to becoming a fantasy author because Tolkien was my first big influence. I thought a fantasy writer had to learn ancient languages and do years of world building and and it was so I kind of went that way. I eventually went to graduate school. I'm a medievalist, so like Tolkien, I specialized in Old English and in Old Norse. Learned a few other languages like Welsh and eventually Nepali. But it was a really roundabout way of doing this. I always knew I wanted to write fantasy.
Wow, amazing.
But first I thought I needed to do all this to prepare myself. So
okay.
It was a long way. And eventually I did start, like I said, about 18 years ago, writing. I started by drawing a map and
of this map?
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, this map I drew this 18 years ago. This is a version that Jack Shepard really made nice, but I have a handwritten version of it, so hand drawn. But yeah, so I just poured all of that Tolkien, and Le Guin was another big influence for me
Le
growing up,
Guin. Yeah,
I
Le
have to
Guin.
say. And then all the Old English and Old Norse, but also my travels. I lived in Asia, I lived in Nepal, and I'm very thankful for that experience, because I think it also is a huge factor in my writing, because if I hadn't had that experience of living in South Asia, I think I probably would have written something much more traditional fantasy. And it is, my fantasy is very, in some ways, traditional like, but I think that having that experience has pulled me in a slightly different direction. And there's a kind of a South Asian influence, an Eastern influence, a Buddhist philosophical influence on my writing as well, I think. So that's a big part of my journey as well.
Wow, it's also impressive. And I think it's kind of reflected though in your book. I mean, this means that taking the scenic route kind of works amazingly for The Way of Eden. I have read the book, right? And yeah, you have done a lot of great things in that book, I must say. I'm truly impressed, especially with the world building. There's a lot of things to dissect there. So yeah, well done on that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I guess the goal there is to give the reader a sense of immersion, to give the reader a sense that this is a lived-in world. And I did things that no one will ever read, because it was just world building. I basically wrote, I don't know what it was exactly, maybe 100 pages of just talking about the religions and the various mythologies and the history. I had that all laid out. I didn't do what Tolkien did. I never claimed that, but I have the rudiments of languages, and they are based on actual languages that I know. So I mentioned Old Norse and Old English and Nepali, and also Welsh. So there are rudimentary invented languages that are based on the sounds of those languages in there. So yeah.
And speaking of languages, the names of the setting in your books, almost all of them ended with the on.
Yeah.
Yormanland, Torlon, Carligion. Sorry for that.
Yep.
And I'm wondering, what is the etymology behind these names?
So it's a little different in each case. So Torlund or Elund. Torlund means in Old English, land of towers.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. And Elund is a contraction of Elorland, which is simply the other land of elsewhere, kind of something to that effect. And so that's one etymology. And then the other is like Cargillion. That has a Welsh kind of Caer is actually a word in Welsh, meaning like a fortress or something like that. The Gillian part, it came out of my head. It sounded kind of Celtic to me. So, but over in the East, there are kingdoms that are more South Asian influenced, and there's Sildaran, for example, and then there's Sundara and Gogar. These are place names that are based on the names of ancient people, of the founders of those kingdoms. So there are, most of the names in this in my book are going to have etymologies like that. They're going to have some meaning, and if you're familiar with those languages, then you'll probably catch on. But I had some fun with that. I definitely put in a lot of little winks and a little bit and some nods, and most of the place names actually do mean something, and a lot of the character names too.
No, I knew it. That's why I definitely should ask this question, because I don't know what's the meaning behind those words. It's not only about the setting, because the character's name to me felt quite original as well. Like, for example, Dayraven. I mean, that's English, but that's a name that I haven't ever read in any fantasy novel. Dayraven.
Well, there's a story. Yeah, there's a story behind that, actually.
Oh, really?
So one of my favorite things to teach, and one of my favorite stories ever, is the poem Beowulf.
Oh, okay.
So Dayraven is, in that poem, is actually a throwaway character who is simply some Frankish warrior that Beowulf kills. It's just kind of a throwaway name. And I always felt that is such a cool name. That name deserves a story.
Oh my God.
So I thought, yeah, this is going to be, when I started with the map and everything, I thought Dayraven, that's the name of I didn't know anything else about him, but I knew that's the name of my protagonist, Dayraven. And Dayraven in Old English is how you would say that. But I thought it sounded a little better in modern English. So I modernized his name, although most of the Old English based names I did not modernize. They appear in their Old English forms. But I felt that Dayraven just kind of sounded cool. So
it does.
So that's
where
that
really
name came from.
Yeah. Okay. How about Imhar?
Imhar is a Celtic name. And so Imhar is originally from Adanon, which is one of the more Celtic-based, I guess, cultures. And his name, actually, most of the names down there are Welsh, but I think Imhar, actually, I stole from an Irish source. It's a mixture, down there, yeah.
This is so cool, and I love the brotherhood between Dayraven and Imhar. I think that's one of my favorite parts of the entire novel. I love their friendship so much, and Imhar is always, without spoilers, always like to take care of his brother. Okay, and I like it. I really like that one. And I'm kind of curious though, Philip, because you're teaching, right? You're a teacher, right?
I am. Yeah.
You're a teacher, you are a booktuber, you are reading, and now you are also writing, and you still have to take care of your family. How do you juggle all of this?
I don't know. I mean, it's been a lot of work, honestly. And the secret, I guess, in my case, is I enjoy all those things.
Oh, okay.
So it never feels like work to me. I love writing. I feel just, there are certain things, certain activities that we do. I think a lot of people, when they read, they feel that sense of immersion, and time is irrelevant to the experience.
Oh, yeah.
I feel that way when I'm writing, and I feel that way when I'm doing any activity that I love, like I play tennis, and it just time is irrelevant. I'm in the zone. I'm in this Zen state or something when I'm doing these activities that I'm fully throwing my soul into. And so when I'm talking about books, I love the genre. I love fantasy. As you know, I started the channel as a passion project. And all of it to me is fun, so that helps. But I am very busy.
Yeah, obviously.
It is tough to find that right balance, for sure. So I think a lot of us relate. I'm sure you do too. You have a very busy life. You read a lot. Actually, you cover more books than I do. That's for sure. I have so much respect for that. But that we all have to, I guess, prioritize and make space. But yeah, being passionate about it really helps.
Do you always have time to write every day now?
Right now, I'm not really doing much writing. Actually, in terms of writing, I am formatting and editing book 2 because I promised everybody that this year I'm going to have the March 21 release for The Way of Edan. Then I want June 21 for The Prophet of Edan. That's book 2. And then September 21 for Return to Edan, book 3. So it's really more or less these days I am formatting and editing. And that's how my writing at the moment. And I do have that standalone book that's a sequel. Yep. So that's going to be out in 2024. So I'll have to. That's my plan right now, anyway. And so I want to get that. After I get the Return to Edan done, I'll immediately start revising that standalone sequel, which is called While Darkness Gathers. And so I'm going to have fun diving back into that story and hopefully putting it out for people in 2024.
Amazing. Seriously, amazing. You have my respect. Seriously. Incredible, though. And do you find this is something that I heard from plenty of other fantasy authors, because now you have been writing this trilogy for about 18 years. That's quite a long time. And but many authors, quite many actually told me this one. So after they started writing their own books, or after they are published, they cannot read any more fantasy books. So I guess that doesn't apply to you.
I've heard that too. I've heard certain writers talk about that, or that they
Yeah.
read less fantasy than they used to. And I get that, because you are using a certain part of your brain that there's a lot of overlap between reading and writing, I suppose.
Yeah.
I cannot see myself ever not being a fan of the genre. I am a fan of the genre. And so I don't imagine I will ever stop reading and reviewing and discussing other people's books. That is something that that gets me up in the morning. I'm excited to see what's happening with the genre. I'm a student of the genre. I'm excited by all the directions and the diversity. And I really love this genre, and I love storytelling. And I feel like I have a lot to learn from other authors too. I mean, I have a lot to learn from reading other genres. I have, a lot to learn from reading nonfiction and many other things. But I love reading other fantasy authors to see where their imaginations take them. And so I really don't think I'll ever stop. I may get to a point, though, where after I get that standalone out in 2024, I'll have to start some new stories.
Oh yeah.
That's a whole different thing. So I might, by the time I get that one out and I start a new one, maybe in 2025 or end of 2024, I might have to say, okay, I need to decrease the amount of reading I do, but I'll never stop. I don't think I would ever want to stop. So just because if people like my books and they want me to write more of them, I'm going to have to dedicate more time to that for sure. In the future. Right now, it's easier because I have the stories more or less written. Editing is not the same as starting from scratch. So I do feel that I'll need more energy and time eventually to start new stories. And so I'll have to probably cut back a bit on the other activities in order to do that. If it goes really well, Petrik, what I really love to do is retire from teaching and become a full-time writer. That's my dream.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing.
Yeah. I love teaching, but this is my calling, I feel. So
I mean, you've been thinking about doing this since you were 12. That's incredible. And do you find editing to be more taxing than writing the book?
No, I love editing. It's my favorite part. So, if you compare it to, for me, it's my experience. Other people probably feel differently, but my experience with writing is the hardest part is starting.
Okay.
And it's like I'm an old rusty engine, and I have to crank up the old engine and get going, and I get the ideas out there in a raw form. And then I go back and I look over and I think, oh, this is not good. And I edit, but just to get the ideas, I'm a planner too. So I will have an outline of the entire book before I start writing.
Okay.
So I have kind of a skeleton, I guess. And then I put on the clay. If it's a sculpture, I'm putting on the lumps of clay, and that's the beginning. What I really enjoy is the details. I love the editing. I like putting in the little lines, and I like putting I love that. I love tweaking it and going back to the story and feeling immersed in that world that I've created through all that labor. So yeah, my favorite part is actually editing. Maybe I'm a weirdo, but
yeah, it's kind of rare for me to hear this actually.
Usually, is it? Okay.
Yeah, because usually I think it's because they have to see their first draft, right? Sometimes, right? Authors have to see their first draft, and we know that in first draft, well, it's not good. Usually, it's not good.
You need to. That's a draft.
Yeah, and they don't like seeing that again sometimes. But I think editing is very necessary, and multiple times it can't hurt the book. Okay, it can't hurt.
Well, and you're a champion of self-published books, and that's one of the things I love about you. And I love self-published books too. I'm more and more. I've been reading more of them, and I'm trying to get back into it. I'm in so many read-alongs right now. It's hard for me to get to some of the self-published books that I have waiting for me, but I'm eager to get there. But that's the thing that I find interesting now, because it's a different world for self-publishing authors in so many ways. And one of them is the opportunities for getting other eyes on your book, which I think is very important. I have to say, one of the biggest wonderful things to happen to me was meeting AP Canavan who has a YouTube channel of his own, A Critical Dragon. He is my developmental editor, and he helped me. He helped me very much to improve these stories. I had an agent when I was trying to get them published traditionally. He also helped a lot. He was a great agent who gave me some broad feedback, and I definitely took a lot of his advice into consideration in my revisions. I don't even know how many times I revised my books, but having people, I mean, seriously, it's over 10 times I've gone over these books again and again and again, easily. So, but it's essential. And that's something I want to, I know a lot of people know that, but people who are thinking maybe about writing, it's not that you write a book and you're done. That's step one. You really need to edit to get your best version of your story out there. Don't take 18 years necessarily, but seek feedback. And I know that editors are very expensive, so it maybe isn't realistic to say everybody you have to get an editor, but do what you can to get that feedback. Find people whose opinions you respect. Start with friends and family if that's what you've got, and they're going to be nice to you. That's just how it is. But if you can get somebody, and if you can afford a good editor like AP, then I can't recommend it highly enough. And it is something to keep in mind if you want to self-publish. You're going to spend likely, if you do, you're going to spend $5,000 to $10,000 to get your book out there, and that's just how it is. Because you're doing all these things that a publisher would be doing for you if you were going the traditional route. And that's not cheap, but we have to acknowledge that the publishers do still a lot to get a book out there, and they have to put some money into it. So, and you're a self-published author, you're on your own, and you really do need to take all those things very seriously. Take the cover very seriously, because people are going to judge your book by its cover. Take the editing seriously, because you don't want typos all over your manuscript. You can't get rid of them all. They're like little gremlins. They appear. But get as many as you can out of there, as many as you can. And so every single thing, the marketing part, you got to take it seriously. You have to make a serious effort to become part of these online communities like BookTube and whatever. There are many others, but you really need to take all these roles seriously if you want someone other than your family members and your friends to buy your book. So
totally true. And that is already a stigma against self-publishing. So if you're not taking this seriously, well, let's just say it won't do well. You originally went to the traditionally published route, right?
I did, I tried. I mean, I obviously, no editor at a publishing house decided to take on my book, which is fine, actually. I understand that. In many ways, my story is, I think of it as a blend of traditional fantasy and
classic. Totally.
Yeah. I think of it as very much hearkening back to more classical style in some ways. Certainly the prose and the style of this that's natural to me. A lot of people would find it to be kind of old, and that's fine. I love that. That's who I am. But it's also modern in some ways. But I think a lot of editors saw that and said, you know what, we're looking to push fantasy in new directions and do really different things. Mine is medieval inspired, although there's Eastern influence in there as well. But it is in those senses perhaps more traditional than what the publishers were looking for. So, and I get that. I don't have a problem. And I'm actually really kind of happy that I'm enjoying, let's put it this way, I'm enjoying the creative freedom and the ability to decide, I'm going to put 3 books out in 1 year. I could never do that if I were going the traditional route. And we might not be seeing my book. If I had gotten a traditional publisher, this book could be out in 2 years from now.
2 years.
That's how it is right now. I mean, publishing is so slowed down after the pandemic and everything else that it could be a long way if I had gone the traditional route. So now I'm able to say, all right, guys, I'm putting out all 3 books in 1 year. And I'm going with a stained glass cover, and no traditional publisher would have done this.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say no traditional publisher. This does not look like and I have this band across the middle, by the way. It's a proof copy. I don't have my author copies yet, but I should have them soon. So this is just a proof. So this band will not be on your cover. But I never would have gotten a traditional publisher to go with a cover like this because they'd say, what is this? This is not this doesn't scream epic fantasy. This seems like some old fashioned kind of, it doesn't conform to, I think, the typical fantasy cover. I wanted to do something different. And I feel like the stained glass fits with the holy war motif. Religion is a very central part of what I'm doing in this series. That's conveyed by the stained glass. And plus, when you read the story, this image makes a lot more sense too. And so, there's a lot to this cover that never would have made it by a traditional publisher. I'm confident in saying that. So I like the creative freedom that I have here to kind of put my own stamp on this. And it's a risk to have a cover like this, but I also think it's very distinctive.
Yeah, it's totally very distinctive. I think in self-publishing, this is good. In self-publishing, this is really good.
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to say right now, and I think this is something you'll appreciate, on average, I believe nowadays self-published covers are better than traditional published covers. On average, there are some beautiful ones on both sides. But I think that because the self-published author is at such a marketing disadvantage, it's in their interest to get the best possible cover. And so a lot of them really take pains to do that. And there's some beautiful self-published covers coming out. And I'm not saying that traditional covers are all garbage. They're not. There are some really great ones too. But I think they have less pressure to have this distinctive, eye-catching cover. So do you agree with that? Do you think the self-published covers are on average a bit better these days?
It's not only a bit. I think it's much better now.
Okay. All right, good.
That's the thing. I think, how do I say this nicely? I don't know how to say this nicely, but I feel like traditional publishing, in terms of cover art, a lot of them, not all, as we talk about, it's not all of them, but have gone they're trying to cut budget as much as possible with the cover art. And I'm not too happy about that. Orbit Books is really good. I think most of their cover art is amazing, but other than Orbit, I'm not too satisfied by the current state of the cover art in traditional publishing. Not too satisfied.
I mean, there've been some winners like John Gwynn's covers on the Bloodsworn trilogy. Those are some of my favorites. Those are brilliant. So there are definitely some traditional covers that are still really awesome. But by and large, I think that maybe it's because they're a little bit averse to risk right now. Traditional publishers seem to be very risk averse. They want something that's safe. And so they're not willing to risk something a bit weird like a stained glass cover or something like that. I don't know. I could be wrong. I think they're trying their best to put out great stories, but traditional publishing has been pushed into this corner where I feel like they feel there's less room for risk. And so maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
That's actually quite a great analysis, though. Because self-publishing right now is really rising. I cannot deny that. It's incredible. It's really incredible. Not only in the quality of stories, but really in everything. So that's why I try to read both. I love traditional publishing. I love self-publishing too. And I love both of them.
Yeah, but lots of love.
Yeah, you made a great point though regarding medieval. Because right now, it really seems like traditional publishers really do not want that in their books. I do not understand why. I have actually heard from plenty of authors that they are really trying not to get any classic fantasy books in their catalogs right now. And I think that's kind of a shame because, I mean, it has been proven that classic fantasy still sells a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I mentioned John Gwynne a moment ago, you're one of your favorites and one of mine. Somebody that I'm actually really honored that people like Mark Lawrence and also Jenny Wirtz as well. Others have compared my book to John Gwynne's book, which I'm like, wow, that's fantastic. But he has a blend of classical, and he and I have very similar influence. I think of John Gwynne as like a kindred spirit, really. We have very similar. We have different styles, I think, but we have very similar influences. I would say. So it's. I think I understand. I like that fantasy is going in new directions. I like that it's becoming more diverse. I like that we're getting all these new voices and these new looks. And, I just finished reading, by the way, as a wonderful example, another trilogy that you love is the Greenbone Saga. I just finished reading Jade City.
Oh, yeah. That's incredible, right?
It's incredible. I love that fantasy is going in this direction. I think it's brilliant. And I love what Fonda Lee is doing there. And would that fantasy have been published in the 80s? Probably not.
Yeah.
So if people like me who are writing more like traditional European medieval fantasy need to step aside and let people like Fonda Lee write these brilliant stories, okay, you know what? It's good for the genre to have some diversity. I hope it won't get to a point though where it's seen as a kind of an automatic no if you're writing European medieval fantasy. Like, we should be promoting great storytelling, right? Wherever it can be found. Yes, I want to see more diversity, and I'm all for it, and I think it's good to seek it out. But also, if you come across an author who's done some European medieval inspired Viking, whatever, if it's great storytelling and people are going to love it, why wouldn't you put it out there?
Exactly. I agree. I totally agree with this. And you also mentioned that John Gwynne is an often comparison for your books, and I have to kind of agree with that. No, you two have totally different style. You have different style, but I feel like you two are inspired by something similar, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, in fact, I know for a fact that his first fantasy was the same as mine, which was Lloyd Alexander's The Chronicles of Prydain.
Prydain, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a Welsh-inspired fantasy, and he has a Welsh background himself. Okay. I mean, he's English, I think, more or less, but he's also Welsh, right? So, but yeah, I mean, that's so cool. But also Tolkien is huge for both of us.
Yeah.
I think also going back again to those old, like I'm a medievalist, and Beowulf is absolutely woven throughout my book, and so are the Old Norse sagas, and that's true for John Gwynne as well. There are certain things he does differently, like I think because of his experience as a reenactor.
Yeah.
He knows weapons and combat. And he's so good at that stuff. I wouldn't compare myself to his knowledge of weaponry and armor and all that stuff is just the best.
Yeah.
Right. And then I have different things, like, I have a more linguistic background. So I do things with that, but so we're different in some ways, but our sources of inspiration are very similar.
Yeah, that's for the Way of Edan and also the Eden trilogy, because I definitely felt the Tolkien stuff inside your book as well. I think there were some nods to Tolkien in the book. Yeah, I definitely catches on some, and that makes me smile. Without giving spoilers, those make me smile. I love that. Though I must say, I'm not too much a fan of a song, though.
Oh yeah. I'll forgive you.
Honestly speaking, yeah. But other than that, it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah. So the songs in there are actually very much modeled on Old English poetry.
Okay.
Which was alliterative. So when Old English poetry, it's all very much alliterative. So like I'll just recite the opening lines of Beowulf in Old English. So, what weg ardena in yer dagam feud kuning a thrim jafrunan hu da atholingus ellen fremedon. So
that's so cool.
Hear every line. I just recited 3 lines, and there's a 3 stresses in most Old English lines that alliterate. In other words, they begin with the same letter. And then there's a fourth stress. So every line has 4 stresses, and then 3 of them usually alliterate and begin with the same letter. And I've done the same thing in all those songs that appear, those bardic songs. Those are all
I have to reread those passages.
Because you skipped them. I bet you skipped them.
No, I did not skip them. I actually read through them, but yeah,
okay.
I don't usually gel well with songs.
No, it's fine. I get it. A lot of people are going to be like, oh, what is this? But it really is Old English inspired, and there's a story. One of the things I try to do, this is something you see in Beowulf a lot. There's always stories within the story.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of stories within the story.
I love those parts.
Good, because they're thematically linked to the main story. So I have a lot of foreshadowing. I have a lot of thematic echoes in these stories within the stories. And so when the bard, or the shaper as I call him, after the Old English word is shop, which means shaper. That's what they call the bard. So when he's reciting one of these songs, it's an old story, but I want to say this is thematically related to the story you're reading right now. So that's kind of what I'm doing with those.
I really love though that in those parts, because Raven loved those stuff, right? Raven, and also one of the dwarves, I think that's how you pronounce it. Yeah, one of the
dwarf.
Yeah. They really love that stuff, and sometimes others are impatient, but when they're talking about that, that's so hilarious to me.
Yeah, I actually thought, okay, I need someone like Imhar, and even Hlok, the other dwerg, to voice the reader's frustration with these guys always telling these old stories. Come on, what is this? So I put in a character for the reader like you, who's like, please don't sell me another song. So,
but I really love the story between inside stories. I think those on reread will be something truly incredible. Once I've read the entire trilogy, I think those will make more sense, because once I get the full picture, right, as usual in epic fantasy books.
Yep. And it's very much in itself a nod to Beowulf, where Beowulf is a story of monster slaying. Essentially, you have 3 monster slaying episodes. You have Grendel, you have Grendel's mother, and a dragon. I mean, spoilers for Beowulf, it's more than 1,000 years old, guys. So he slays these monsters, and that's really, if you were to summarize it, but what it also has all these other stories that are told. So when Beowulf kills Grendel, the Shop, the bard, sings a song of an older hero, and it's a deliberate comparison to Beowulf. In other words, the bard is putting Beowulf among the canon of heroes. So it's a tribute, but it's also thematically related. It's like, here's an older hero who saved his people, like Beowulf has just done. And so it also the bard might tell a story of tragedy, because that's a huge theme going through the entire poem. Is life is fleeting. We're all going to die. What are you going to do about it? And the old pagan response is, we're going to do great deeds, so our names will live on, and the bard will sing tales of us, that sort of thing. So that's the old pagan Germanic response, and that's something I kind of explore in my book a bit. And also we talked about Buddhism before, and there's a different response there, where Buddhism also recognizes life is fleeting. We're all going to die. Everything is temporary. But their conclusion isn't, okay, so we got to do great deeds. So our name, their conclusion is, accept that life is fleeting, accept that you are part of everything, accept that you are connected with everything. And I love that. I think it's such a beautiful thing. And another response, in the more monotheistic religions like Christianity and Islam is, life is fleeting. We're going to die. Believe, have faith, and live your life well, and you'll be okay for the afterlife, right? So that's that response as well. And that's something I think I explore in here too. So a lot of it is, how are we responding to mortality, and what are the consequences of those responses?
Yeah, and I don't know whether I have mentioned this to you or not, but I'm actually Buddhist. So
Oh, you are Buddhist. Okay,
yeah.
cool.
So
Very cool.
I got that. I got that from your book, and I love that. Yeah, because Buddhist is very fixated on karma, right? Good karma means
Yep.
great deals to them. It is basically, in to put it as simply as possible, it is basically their main teaching.
Yeah, and I find Buddhism. I'm not a practicing Buddhist,
Hmm.
but I've read a bit. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I lived in Nepal, which is
Yeah,
primarily Hindu and Buddhist.
yeah,
It's where the Buddha was born. He was born in Nepal,
Nepal.
so it's something that I became more familiar with as I lived there. And I have a lot of friends who are Buddhist, and I've read up on it, and I find it beautiful. If I ever, if particularly philosophical Buddhism,
Okay, yeah.
I mean the more philosophical aspects of it, I think are an incredibly helpful for living one's life
Yeah.
in a beautiful and connected way. I think it fascinates me, and I love it. And I'll probably read more about it someday.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to practice more meditation and that sort of thing.
That's
So
something that I still have to learn to do.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that your book, because I know how much you love, for example, okay, I know how much you love Malazan, Book of the Fallen, but I
Oh yeah.
actually quite surprised that your book is not it doesn't feel like any book that I've read. I mean, it at the same time it is a blend of classic and also modern, but I also don't feel like to put it in harsh words, a copycat. I do not feel like
Uh,
it is. I do not feel like it is copycat of any other book, and I do not see any of Malazan inspiration in that, in the Way of Eden, at least.
yeah. So I wrote the trilogy mostly before I read the Malazan Book of the Fallen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Makes sense.
But
Hmm.
it's the third book that I
Hmm.
wrote after reading Malazan Book of the Fallen. So when you
Hmm.
get to the third book, maybe you'll see some influence there.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's where I felt maybe, and I wasn't terribly conscious, but if there is some Malazan influence, it's more in the third book than in the first two.
Uh,
Yeah, so I would say, yeah, much more if you're looking for influences in the trilogy overall, and particularly in the beginning, definitely Lord of the Rings,
yeah.
Tolkien, Le Guin. Stylistically, I think I feel more stylistically in terms of the prose and all of that. These older authors are a big influence on me, probably
Hmm.
more than on most modern fantasy authors.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Le Guin's essay From Elfland to Poughkeepsie, which
Hmm.
the essay where she talks about fantasy prose and how writing your book, your fantasy, in a language that is not modern is part of the immersion for the reader. In other words,
Oh.
you are signaling to the reader, this world is not our world.
Hmm.
If you can change the names of your characters and the place names and it reads just like a modern novel, then that's probably you're not doing the same kind of thing you could do
Hmm.
with a different style of language that signals to the reader, you're now in this other world. So I hope that's what it achieves. That's what I was trying to do in the book, because it's not, I hope it's not, I don't think it's difficult to read. I tried to make it accessible. And not too archaic, but
Hmm.
who's a good writer who does this really well is George R.R. Martin.
Ah.
He does he has a lot of archaic old words in there, old style of writing, but it never feels difficult to read.
Yeah.
I've always felt that he does a really good job of that. So
I do not think that your book doesn't feel accessible. I think it is quite accessible. I must say
okay,
though that the names will be quite difficult to learn for
the
newcomer to
names.
fantasy. Yeah, the names. There are quite a lot, right? There are quite a lot. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. But in terms of the writing, I think it is quite accessible, and it definitely achieved that sense of its belonging in a completely different world to ours. Even though there is a character named Utrecht.
Yes, it's an old English name, and I haven't actually watched that. I haven't read that whole series or watched it myself, which is weird
Ah,
because
The Last
I love that
Kingdom.
stuff.
Yeah.
I haven't actually. So I need to do that when I have more time.
When I have more time.
Yeah.
That's a difficult part. And do you have any preference of favorite characters to write? I mean, Dayraven obviously take the central stage, but if you have to choose, like there's Sekara, there is Imhar, there is the Supreme Priest, Bloodline. Which one was your favorite to write?
Wow, that's a very difficult question, and it's a fun one to think about, though. I think in a way, in most of the characters, I can see a little bit of myself. It may sound a weird thing to say, but I can see a little, even in characters like Bloodline, I can see myself a little bit in him and his sureness and his certainty. And occasionally his doubts, right? So his approach. Yoruman, the high priest.
Yoruman, yeah.
He's one that I somehow, he wasn't going to be a very important character at first. And somehow his voice just kept sort of calling me. And I think a lot of people are going to find his particular struggles relatable in a way. I mean, he's not the nicest person at all.
No, he's not.
But I think a lot of people will kind of, in a way, feel a sense of identification with, in some respects.
Yeah, in some respects.
With where he's coming from. So he was a fascinating one for me to write because I found myself repulsed by him. And at the same time, very sympathetic toward him. So that was a very strange experience. And I still haven't quite figured out how I feel about him, but he becomes more important, in fact, in the trilogy. So that was an interesting one for me to write. So I guess that'll be my answer in a way. I mean, I have fun with all of them. I love aspects of all of these characters, and some of them will have more prominent, will become more POV characters in the next books, like Orvandil.
Yeah.
And Gnorn as well. And so you'll get some more POV stuff from some of these, and so there'll be some new characters as well in book 2. Yeah.
Will book 2 be as big as book 1, or it's bigger? Bigger.
Yeah. They get longer. Each book gets longer than the last.
Oh, nice.
I guess. I mean, if you liked the first book, and that's good news for you, I guess that the second is longer, and then the third is longer still.
Yeah, definitely. And there's another thing that I really like about your book is the battle scenes. And do you find it difficult to write that? Most of the battle scenes are small skirmishes, relatively small skirmishes, except the last battle, which is the Battle of the Way. That's much bigger one. And do you find them difficult to write?
I enjoy sort of orchestrating these things, I guess you could say. I mean, I played D&D when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Various role-playing games, and there's some nerd part of me that enjoys just sort of kind of zooming out, seeing the big picture, but I tend to also go in and give the ground level view. And do the sort of Abercrombie thing, which is to head hop in the midst of the battle and give all these different POVs and make it more exciting and fast. And so there's a part of me that finds it challenging. I also find it horrible, though, and I try to make the violence in my stories to feel like actual violence. I don't consider my book at all to be grimdark, but
no, it's not.
There is one thing that I really respect about grimdark. One of the things that I respect about grimdark, and that is how there's never any attempt to glorify violence in grimdark. They show it for what it is. It's horrible. It's disgusting. It has a horrible impact on the people who receive it and the people who perpetrate it.
Yeah.
And that is something I wanted to convey as well through this violence, that this has consequences. This maims you, if not physically, then mentally. Violence scars you in ways. And so I hope that it comes across that I'm not reveling in the violence, but that I'm trying to look at it not as a this is glorious and isn't it so cool and epic, and then forget about it.
Yeah.
Because it has consequences. And I hope that people will see that not just in this book, but in the second book. If you do like the battles or the battle in the first, then there's lots more in the second, because the war is really just getting underway.
Yeah.
In the first book. So things are really, the first book is setting up all the chess pieces in a way. And the second book is where things really get epic, I think. And there's some new players as well that you're going to see. But yeah, so the short answer is yes, I do enjoy writing those parts, and hopefully they feel compelling. To people.
Does. It did. And you mentioned I think something that I certainly felt in how do I say this without spoilers, but in Bloodline. So there is a certain action, let's just say, of pure violence that happened in this book. I think you will know which scene I'm talking about in the Way of Edan, and that is often mentioned again. That particular scene is often mentioned again. It is something that is kind of hurting Bedla, and I think I appreciate that. It makes him a more complex character.
Yeah, I feel, like I said before, there's a part of me that says, I kind of identify with Bledla, or a younger me would have maybe identified with Bledla in some ways. I hope I was never as sure of myself, but I do try to introduce him in a way that might feel very stereotypical, that might feel like, okay, this is a villain right here. But I hope what happens is that readers later see some layers to this character, and maybe even see where, in comparison to some of the other people around him, in some ways, he's actually not so bad. Okay, so at least he's consistent. He's morally consistent. Even if you don't agree with his morality, even if you don't agree with his certainty, he is consistent. He's not a hypocrite.
Yeah.
Right?
He's just someone who is just so, let's just say, so absolutely believe in his faith. Absolutely believe his faith. Yeah. And if let's say what happened is that he's required to do one thing, and that thing is justice, according to the commoners, he will do that. And I think that's what makes him so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a true believer. He is a true believer. And I was trying to explore the ways in which, and as you know very well, religion has been a real blessing for many people. Various religions have been very important in people's lives, but religions also have been used as an excuse for violence in human history. That's happened again and again and again.
It's still happening right now.
It is still happening now. That's right. It is very unfortunate. But so I'm interested in that. Why? How does that happen? For what reasons? Are the people who perpetrate the violence true believers? Or are they really cynical people who are selfish and are just using the religion for their own purposes? And I think that the both things can coexist, and that there are many different reasons why holy wars and violence happen in the name of religion. And so I'm trying to explore all that, and the ways in which religion can sustain people too. I hope that comes across too, that there are characters who belong to the same religion who are really models of empathetic and moral, in my opinion, good behavior. So it's difficult when you find yourself in the midst of an institutionalized religion. And if the main controllers of that religion are doing things that you disagree with morally, how do you handle that? Do you leave the religion? Do you stay with the religion and try to change it in a direction that you feel is better? How do you wrestle with that? I think that's a really interesting question.
Yeah, a difficult one. Yeah. And that's the thing. Religion is certainly one of the biggest theme of, maybe even the biggest theme of the Way of Edan. And that's also, as we talked about earlier, it is reflected in the cover art. And are you, in the cover art process, are you actually involved in everything?
I am involved to the extent that I'm the one who said, I want it to be a stained glass window. That was my
idea. Okay.
And I was inspired by of course, medieval stained glass windows.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've never seen them, I highly recommend looking at the stained glass windows designed by Edward Burne-Jones.
Okay, I will check it out.
Yeah, Burne-Jones, it's Burne-Jones.
Okay.
Edward Burne-Jones, who was a 19th century artist who was associated with the Pre-Raphaelites. He was good friends with William Morris. And William Morris was the fellow that I wrote my dissertation about. He was a medievalist from the 19th century. He wrote fantasies that inspired J.R.R. Tolkien, among others.
Oh, okay.
if you look at Tolkien's letters, you will see when he was young and when he was old references to William Morris. And when he's younger, he's basically saying he's writing the Silmarillion, and he's saying, I'm trying to do what William Morris did.
Oh, right? Okay.
So William Morris wrote these prose romances, they were called, because fantasy was not a genre back then. Essentially, you'd recognize them as fantasy. And so, but he also had this company that made furniture and stained glass windows and all kinds of medieval inspired things. And so his friend Edward Burne-Jones designed stained glass windows for this company, and they put them in churches and all over the place. And they're beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful. Okay. They're a combination of medieval and 19th century. And so just Google Edward Burne-Jones stained glass windows, and you will see some beautiful, they're in some museums and things too. You'll find them, but you'll get a real feast for the eyes if you love that sort of thing.
Oh, I do. I do. That's because I don't know if you know this artist, but he's a Chinese artist. The name of the artist is Jian Guo. So Jian Guo did a lot of stained glass art for many fantasy books. Yeah, but it's a Chinese edition. For example, like Brandon Sanderson's books. He's the Chinese cover artist for his books, and everything like Mistborn, Stormlight Archive, everything is done in stained glass. And I think you will.
I have to see these. I have to see these.
I think you will like them. I don't know whether you have started the cover art for the second book or not. But if not, this will be a great source of inspiration. They are so well done. And that's why when I saw your cover art, I was just so happy.
So cool. I'm gonna look that up. I did not know about that.
Okay.
So now I'm gonna go look it up, because that sounds really cool. And I'm excited. That is very, very cool. Thank you, Petrik.
I will send you some arts later. I will send you.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So before we get to the final questions, just a few more questions. What is the hardest part of writing the Eden trilogy?
Wow. The hardest part was probably waiting for the traditional publishing process to unfold.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I mean, the writing itself, I love. I love writing. I can't. There's no one part of it that I didn't enjoy. I just had a blast with it. And the hardest part for me was trying to go the traditional publishing route. And work. I loved working with my agent. Fantastic person, very helpful. But then when it came time to pitch the books, with the publishing industry being in the state it's in, it took months and months and months for any kind of response, like even an acknowledgement. Okay, we got your book, thank you. Nothing. I mean, it's just like, wow, I mean, it's not just me.
I know.
It's that bad. It's just, that's how it is. So that was frustrating for me, to have to wait. And then finally, I just made the decision with my agent. I had a really good conversation with my agent. I said to my agent, look, maybe it's a good idea for me to go ahead and self-publish. And he agreed with me. And he said, yeah, it's probably the best route right now, given the state of publishing, given the preference now, and seemingly because we did get some feedback eventually.
Okay.
We did get some feedback from editors, and it was more or less kind of what we were talking about before. Like, this is great. I get maybe they say that to everyone, but I got some nice compliments about the story and the writing. But more or less, they said, this is not what we're looking for right now. You know, we're trying to go in new directions, you know, that sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
So that's how that went. And that part I'm fine with, but just how frustratingly long it was. And I don't think we ever heard back from some of them even. But
Damn.
ultimately, just said, let's just do this. Let's just, because I'm getting old. I'm getting old waiting here. So that was the hardest part, was just waiting and waiting and waiting. And then, but I felt it was a very empowering decision to go ahead and self-publish. The moment I decided I'm going this route, I felt so much better.
Oh, okay.
It was much just like a weight fell off from me. I'm not waiting for someone else to judge my work. I'm taking ownership and I'm putting it out there on my own. And that felt really good. That felt really good.
Yeah, understandable. So, totally understandable. And on the plus side, in the long run, you also get more money.
Well, for each sale. I mean, I cannot match the ability of a traditional publisher to market a book. I'm just one little fella, but I do make more money per sale.
Yeah,
which is nice.
Per sale.
Not as much as I thought I would make, but you know, because when you do the like for a paperback, you know, whether it's through Amazon KDP or Ingram Spark or whatever, the cost of publishing comes out of your percentage. So with Amazon, this is a well-known fact. KDP gives you 60% for a paperback, right, of the sale. I don't get 60% of the sale. I get a lot less because I also have to pay for the publishing. So So yeah, just to give people an idea, if the book costs $18.99, which is what this is going to cost, then I get about $5. You know, which is definitely way more than a traditional published book would get. I would get probably under $1 in that case.
Yeah, true.
So yeah, and with the ebook, I get 70% of the sale, and that, of course, that's a lot cheaper than the physical book.
Yeah, and will you activate a Kindle Unlimited?
Yes. I chose that
definitely
option.
Definitely do that, Philip. That's a huge boost.
Yeah, I chose that option, and I don't know exactly how that works. I'm figuring out a lot of things, but when I was setting it up, I chose Kindle Unlimited.
Okay, that's good. That's I think so many self-published fantasy authors right now are making money out of that Kindle Unlimited. Cannot deny. Even though
I got good advice from people like Ryan Cahill. Was really nice. He just reached out to me, and he saw, I guess, that I was self-publishing, and he just reached out and said, would I have some advice for you if you want. And he was really nice about it. Super nice guy. I haven't even read his books yet. I'm going to, but I haven't even read his books yet. And he was just so really, and he's very savvy as well. He really knows. He knows what he's doing. Others like Von Roycroft helped me out, and Thiago Abdallah gave me some great tips. So it's a great community, self-published authors, a lot of really very kind people out there.
And definitely listen to Ryan Cahill. He knows what he's doing in
self-publishing. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
He knows what he's doing. He's got it figured out, I think, probably more than anyone.
His books are selling insanely well.
Good for him. Good for him. I mean, he's showing what can be done, and I love it. I wish him all the success, and I can't wait to read his books. I hear really great things about him.
I think you will like his books. I think you will like it. It's very John Gwynne.
Cool. Cool.
So I think we have arrived at the final question. What do you hope that readers will take out of your books?
Wow. Well, I hope that I know that not everybody's going to love these books. That's how it is. I mean, no book is going to please every reader. No fantasy book is going to please every fantasy fan. But I hope that for some readers, I will be able to deliver a compelling and beautiful story that moves them, maybe in somewhat similar of a fashion to how Tolkien moved me when I was that 12-year-old boy. That's my dream, is to give people a cathartic experience, to help them to wrestle with their life experiences and to make some sense out of what's happening around them, and in a way that is beautiful. So if I can add a little bit of beauty to someone's life, I'll feel wonderful. Yeah.
Nice. I certainly agree that fantasy is a necessity, at least for me. The fantasy genre is a necessity. Without it, I don't think I can function in this world.
Yeah, same here. Same here. I mean, it really is. Storytelling to me is part of what we are. We are the storytelling creature. We need stories. We absolutely need stories. To me, to make sense of our experiences. That's why we tell stories. So, yeah, I'm happy to be throwing mine into the vast cauldron of stories, and hopefully some people will find it inspiring.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it will. It will capture plenty of readers, Philip. So I think that's pretty much for today's conversation. Just as a reminder, The Way of Eden will be published really soon on March 21st. So yeah, that's not long from now. Make sure to pre-order. I think it is a great book. And also, the second book will be released in when? June?
June 21. Yeah.
June 21. And finally, the last book in the trilogy, September 21. So yeah, entire trilogy within this year. There is no need to wait long. You don't have the excuse to say, I'm waiting for the trilogy to be completed now. But yeah, make sure to pick up The Way of Eden. And thank you so much, Philip, for coming to my channel. It means a lot. And seriously, it means a lot. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate you sitting down with me, taking this time in your busy life. And as I said before, you are such a wonderful and vital part of our community. And I know I speak for so many people when I say I'm very grateful that you're here, and I'm very honored to call you my friend.
Yeah, likewise. So I wish you the best of luck. And seriously, I think many people will love this book. Thank you, Philip. Bye-bye.